Hi, this is Julie at Love's Beginning with a talk called Stability Under the Surface of Conflict. The first statement I was given is you must trust the leader, but in order to trust the leader, you must find all the places where you are not trusting the leader and let go. And some people ask the question sometimes, who is there to let go? And so it's good to turn backward away from the perception of separate identity and look toward the reality of shared identity, of oneness, of what is beyond concept when I stop talking and raising separate concepts into the mind, right? Of course, there's benefit, but we also must admit we do perceive separate and opposing concepts in our experience come to life and in forms in our world. And wherever I feel tension, that is the indicator, the very helpful indicator, that I am attached to that back and forth. And I do believe I'm separate, and I believe you're separate too. And I do believe that it is useful to be guided by this sense of separateness, because how do I know? My feeling just told me. So that is something I can consciously stop when I feel and let go of, turn back toward the truth, be still, be still and know that I am God. So there's that. You must trust the leader, but in order to trust the leader, you must find all the places where you are not trusting the leader and let go. And also to be seen here is we're all the leader. If there's the same one presence behind everything, that is the leader, and that is what can be trusted. So I don't have to try to pretend to trust the surface of anyone or anything. It's just the surface, and the ego can interpret it, and the ego can call it positive or negative. But I can let spirit use the concept of anything. As long as I'm going to have concepts here, I might as well give them to spirit and say, okay, you use them, because the purpose here is being led through and out of the dream. The purpose here isn't the dream. The purpose is allowing myself to be led through and out of the dream. So feeling is useful to me today, because every time I notice any tension or stress, that's where I'm not trusting the leader, what I truly am, what you truly are, what truly exists versus what senses tell me. So what senses tell me, and any ego analysis the ego is going to give me about that becomes less and less important. My memory of who or what the leader is, all of us, what's real about anyone or anything that's ever present, that becomes more and more important. And so I consult that more and more. I don't know why I feel the prompt to say how these talks happen. So I received several statements ahead of time, and then I just talk from those. So here's another statement I received. We invite you to look at ego's definitions of I'm failing and I'm succeeding, both fearful. And of course anybody else we're going to attempt to label in that way. So-and-so is failing. So-and-so is succeeding, both fearful. So when I'm labeling and believing in the label, I'm fearful, unless I'm recognizing the sameness behind the surface of conflict that I prefer to see, where it does look like someone is failing or succeeding. It does look like I'm failing or succeeding in various ways, but that's just the surface of conflict I ask to see. Always behind the surface of conflict is the same thing present in everyone and everything beyond the all appearance of failure or success. Failure or success are not things I'm capable of analyzing. I'm capable in a fantasy world of seeing the constant interplay of what appear to be different things, because it's imagination, because it's a dream, because it's an illusion. because I'm hypnotized. That's why I see this interplay of apparently separate things, and I see that it's possible for one thing to dominate another thing, or one thing to be subsumed, taken over by another thing. That's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see that pattern repeating, and I wanted to be caught in it tightly, to deny what's actually true, what's actually here all the time. The only thing that is actually real, the thing that doesn't move or change, the thing that can't be damaged, that's what I'm trying to avoid. And when, with all my might, and when I feel tension or stress, I can notice that's what I'm up to. I'm trying to pretend a dream is real. And it's not real, and it can't be real. So I might as well just relax out of that and turn toward what can guide me and flow with that today. That's always my opportunity. Okay, so ego associates. It picks out one separate aspect of time, space, and labels it. All ego labels have fearful underpinnings because they all represent conflict. They all have opposites. They all have degrees. Everything I made, so there's this system of picking out separate aspects, labeling them, a back and forth, degrees. Spirit can use that structure. So it's not like I have to try to change behavior, to not lean on this structure, which is the underpinning, the structure of the entire dream is based on this fantasy of conflict. It's not like I have to try to stop acting from that place. It's more like I can recognize I made a structure, the structure's meaningless, and my job now is to give that structure to spirit, to what I actually am, not to what I imagined to keep me in this imaginary state. I give the structure born in imagination to Holy Spirit, and I say, use this. This is a tool I use here to keep myself trapped. Okay, so let's say I keep nailing up layers of protection. I have my hammer and nail, and I keep nailing up these layers of protection to block love out. Instead, I give all the nails and the hammer to Spirit and acknowledge I don't know how to use these tools on my behalf or on the behalf of those I see as other. So you have the tools, and I'll agree to be guided. Whenever I am in a moment of tension or stress, I have tools in my hand, and I'm attempting to use them, and I'm trying to reinforce barriers against love. That's what I'm doing with the tools that I invented, that I made up. And instead, I can give them to Spirit. I just have to stop for a moment and recognize I, as a separate one, as I conceive, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to act on my behalf or the behalf of others. And here are the tools for you to use, Spirit. It's your job. I mean, I'm talking to myself when I say this. That's what I am. That's what you are. That's what everything really is, this unified Spirit. So I place these tools in the hands of Spirit and say, okay, the purpose here is to be guided through and out of the dream. And I have to give everything I invented in the dream over to what is real. Spirit is real. Separate me as a concept, not real. No matter how I tried to build it up or bolster it or make it strong or fancify it or distinguish it from something else, it can't be real. But Spirit always is real. So any tool I notice I'm using, striving to use, I can give it to Spirit and just say, okay, use this. All right, when you focus upon God, you are not focusing upon any back and forth or upon any labeling of any back and forth. So I have had a God allergy for quite some time because in my memory of being young, I would hear people use the word, and it never made sense to me. Now, what made sense to me was it was something wordless, being by myself, just walking down a dirt road with wildflowers around me, and nothing about that was a concept. But peace was there. There were no people there except for the me person, but I wasn't focusing on that. I just felt one with, in a way that I never felt one with when I seemed to be around other people. And so when people would start talking about God, I just never connected that wildflower experience with when people were talking about God. I never saw the two as similar in any way. I never really understood what they were talking about when they talked about God. My parents took us to churches sometimes. They were never strict about it. It's just sometimes we went to church every week, and sometimes we didn't, and sometimes we switched churches. And so I had some exposure to concepts of God that way. I felt closer to what people would call God when I was playing music or when I was outside. That's where I found that. And so when people would say the word God, I couldn't understand. All I could really see was an asshole God, because I was looking at a separate entity, and according to some people, although that was never heavily emphasized in churches where my parents took me, this God was a punishing God, or this God would judge and decide about you, and this God believed it was possible for you to do wrong. So not the asshole God, not any separate entity. When you focus upon God, you are not focusing upon any back and forth or upon any labeling of any back and forth. So to me, what God means now is, that pendulum that goes back and forth of all the labeling, of all ego's judgments about the many things that seem to be separate from one another, and the many relational meanings they seem to have one to another. That pendulum just stops. You stop that back and forth. You stop looking at the dream you're making, all the sensory input, all the perception of the past, and it's kind of like you turn around on the path that you've been walking, trying to get away from love, and you look back toward your source, and you're still, and there's no evaluation going on, no pretending that anything is separate, that anything separate is real. And there's just a very quiet recognition. This is where I've come from. This is what I am. This is what everybody and everyone is. And I'm safe here. If I'm safe here, then everyone and everything, they're all safe here, because there's no they. There's just one of us. There may seem to be many, but they're all one. And there is safety here. So as I'm still showing up in a world, and as I'm still experiencing time and space and sensory input, I need to stop when I'm walking on the path often and turn back around and look toward my source and remember and get oriented and remember my job is to be carried through and out of what I'm imagining. And to remember I'm imagining. And to remember it's all the past. And to remember it's all already been taken care of. This apparent problem of having made time and space. Making isn't real. So many, many moments of rest. And then I can seem to continue on in my time-space journey. But it also gets funnier because I start to realize how meaningless it is. Any goal that the ego would suggest is if I feel that striving and straining or the trying to show up as something worthy behind it, I can see and feel how meaningless it is. And I can just rest instead until what feels like the true impulse, direction, can come through me and be expressed somehow. So there's a lot more stopping and maybe less of that nervous energy that would keep me striving ahead towards something I've picked out as separate and labeled. It's still there because I still notice feeling stress and tension every day and feeling a goal. But now I can look at it and settle down and take a moment and then continue on. You can remember to ask this: what stability exists under the surface of conflict? So I notice there's some tension, or there's some stress, there's some striving, there's some straining forward, and I can always pause. No matter how important I think whatever's going on is, I can always pause. And I can remind myself, under the surface of this apparent striving or straining towards something, under the surface of conflict, there is stability. And I can ask to be pointed in that direction. I can remember I am that stability. So is anybody within the situation I'm experiencing. That's their true identity. Their true identity is in the stability, not in the back and forth. And everything that appears to be in that situation, every separate object or concept, its true nature at its core, in the reality of it, its stability. There's nothing that isn't stability under the surface. And just to pause and remember that is very helpful, very powerful. And then I'm less likely to get caught up in the story of what seems to be happening. When I stop, I can remember to give the story, the apparent forward progress, to spirit, and to say to myself, my actual self and yours, where they're joined, and say, okay, take this and use it. I stopped because I felt tension. When I felt tension, it means the ego is trying to use the story again. And I prefer not. So instead, I can give the story I'm experiencing to spirit as many times as I need to, every day, every hour, every minute, as many times as I need to stop. There's always value in stopping and giving the story back and saying the only purpose of this story is to be used to bring us all home, bring us all back to the full awareness that of where we actually are now. We are actually at home. But we have forgotten, especially when we don't feel good. We feel convinced we're not home, and that's why we don't feel good. So I can always stop. I can always rest. I can always ask that everything I'm perceiving get used in the service of our return home, which is where we are right now. Our return to the full awareness that we are at home, we are safe, we are loved forever. Okay, that's all I have today. Thanks for being here, and happy healing.